Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend the Momo Fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is series a What If Deku Fight with Creepy Monster. It was a quiet evening in the bustling city of Musutafu. The sun had just set, and the streets were bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. But the peaceful atmosphere was about to be shattered. Izuku Midoriya, also known as Deku, had just finished his daily training with All Might. They had been working on refining his control over One for All, especially at higher percentages, and Deku was feeling pretty confident. However, as he was making his way home, something felt off. A strange chill filled the air. Deku paused, scanning the horizon. There was no sign of danger, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. A low, guttural growl echoed in the distance, followed by what sounded like the scraping of claws on concrete. Deku's eyes narrowed. It was a sound he knew all too well. Something was lurking nearby, something powerful, and more dangerous than any villain he'd faced before. "What is that?" he muttered, instinctively activating One for All at 5% to heighten his senses. He sprinted toward the source of the noise, his heart pounding in his chest. The growls grew louder, and the air grew thicker with a sense of dread. As he rounded a corner, he skidded to a halt. Standing in front of him was a grotesque, otherworldly creature. It was tall, at least 12 feet, with a hunched posture. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and veins bulged unnaturally across its body. The monster's face was the most disturbing feature. Its eyes were huge, black pools with no whites or pupils, just dark, unblinking orbs that seemed to swallow light. Its mouth was gaping open, filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth, and it drooled thick, viscous saliva that sizzled as it hit the ground. From its back, twisted appendages, like long, spindly arms, reached out, scraping along the pavement. Deku's stomach twisted in disgust, but he didn't hesitate. His training had taught him one thing: never back down. "Stay calm, Deku," he muttered under his breath, adopting a battle stance. "I've faced worse. I can handle this." The creature's head snapped toward him, and its black eyes seemed to bore into his very soul. It let out a screech, a horrid sound that scraped against Deku's eardrums, and lunged. Deku barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in. He used One for All at 20%, launching himself into the air with a burst of speed. The creature's claws slashed at the air where he had been moments ago, leaving deep gouges in the concrete. "It's fast," Deku thought, dodging another swipe from the creature's claws. "I need to end this quickly." He landed on a nearby rooftop and surveyed the creature from above. Its movements were erratic, unpredictable, and it seemed to have no real sense of strategy. But its power, the strength behind each attack, was frightening. It was like a wild animal, with pure, unrestrained force. Deku's mind raced. "I can't just brute force this. I need to find its weak spot." Suddenly, the creature jerked its head to the side, as if hearing something, or sensing something, off in the distance. It turned and began charging toward the opposite alley, its massive feet thundering against the ground. "Wait, what is it doing?" Deku thought, narrowing his eyes. Before he could follow, he noticed something odd. The air around the creature seemed to warp, as if reality itself was distorting. In an instant, the creature disappeared into thin air, vanishing without a trace. What? Deku's heart raced. Where did it go? He dashed down the street, scanning for any sign of the monster. His eyes flicked back and forth, searching for any hint of the creature's presence. But all he could see were empty streets and shadows stretching long into the night. Then, he heard it. A loud crack echoed behind him, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Deku whipped around just in time to see the creature reappear, now right behind him. It had teleported. Before Deku could react, the monster swung one of its spindly arms toward him with terrifying speed. He managed to dodge, but the arm grazed his shoulder, sending a searing pain through his body. He grit his teeth, refusing to let it slow him down. I have to end this now. Deku used one for all at 50%, launching himself into the air again. This time, he had a plan. As he soared above the creature, he gathered his energy, focusing on a single, concentrated strike. He could feel the power coursing through his body as he gathered it into his fist. The creature's dark eyes locked onto him, and it snarled, readying to strike once more. Detroit Smash! Deku shouted as he descended, fist aimed directly at the creature's chest. The blow connected with a deafening crash, sending the creature reeling back. But it didn't go down. Instead, it staggered, hissing in pain, its mouth gaping open as it let out a shrill screech. Deku didn't give it a chance to recover. He unleashed a barrage of punches, each one landing with the force of a freight train, pushing the creature further and further back. His fists hit with precision, aiming for the spots where the creature seemed weakest, the joints, the center of its chest, and the areas where its skin was most vulnerable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the creature collapsed to the ground, its grotesque form twitching, the screeching noise slowly fading into silence. Deku stood panting, his body aching from the intense battle. Is it over? He wondered, his chest rising and falling with each breath. But as he watched the creature's twitching form, he realized something. The monster's body was starting to dissolve. The skin and flesh melted away, leaving behind nothing but a dark, oozing puddle. Deku's eyes widened in horror. What was that thing? Before he could process what had just happened, he heard a familiar voice behind him. Midoriya. He turned to see All Might, his former mentor and symbol of peace, standing at the edge of the alley. Are you all right? All Might asked, his eyes scanning the area. Deku nodded, though he was still shaken. I'm fine, but I don't understand. What was that monster? All Might stepped closer, his expression serious. It's a creature known as a lurker. They're rare, but they've been appearing more often lately. They can teleport and feed on fear. It's not just a mindless beast, there's something more behind it. Deku looked down at the puddle of goo that was once the creature, his thoughts racing. A lurker, it's not just a monster, it's a part of something bigger, isn't it? All Might nodded grimly. Yes. And that means this won't be the last time you encounter one. Stay alert, Midoriya. The world is changing. Deku glanced one last time at the remnants of the creature. I'll be ready. The remnants of the creature's body were still sizzling on the ground as Deku wiped the sweat from his brow. His heart still pounded in his chest from the battle. Despite his victory, something gnawed at him. The creature hadn't been like any villain he'd faced before. It was different. It had power, but it wasn't just brute force. There was something more, something dark and unsettling. That thing, it didn't feel like a normal monster, Deku muttered to himself, his voice trailing off. He still felt the shivers crawling up his spine. All Might's expression remained serious, a shadow of concern in his eyes. You're right, Midoriya. That wasn't a typical villain. Lurkers are incredibly dangerous. They don't just feed on flesh, they feed on fear, terror. And they aren't exactly part of this world. Deku raised an eyebrow, confused. Not part of this world. What do you mean? All Might glanced around, making sure no one else was in earshot, and then pulled Deku aside into the safety of an alley. The towering hero crouched down, lowering his voice. Lurkers are born from the cracks between worlds. They're creatures of the unknown, from a realm that bleeds into ours. They feed on the fears and darkness that seep into our reality, especially when people feel hopeless or lost. It's why they can be so unpredictable. They don't follow the normal rules of a villain, they operate on a whole different level. Deku's eyes widened. He'd never heard anything like that before. So, they're not just mindless monsters. There's something else to them. All Might nodded solemnly. Exactly. And it's why you need to be more careful. Lurkers are rarely alone. Where there's one, there could be many more hiding, waiting. And they can hide in plain sight, blending into the shadows or the fears of the people around them. Deku clenched his fists. But we can stop them, right? We've stopped worse. All Might's face darkened slightly. Yes, but it's not going to be easy. These creatures aren't like the typical villains you face. You'll need more than just your strength and strategy to beat them. Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed through the city, followed by a tremor that shook the ground beneath their feet. What was that? Deku asked, his eyes scanning the horizon. Before All Might could answer, the air grew cold, and a low, unearthly screech pierced the night. It sounded like a chorus of countless monsters, all blending together into one horrific, echoing cry. That's not good, All Might muttered under his breath. Deku's pulse quickened. It's them, isn't it? All Might stood up straight, his body tensing. We need to move. Now. The two heroes dashed through the city, heading toward the source of the noise. As they raced through the streets, Deku couldn't shake the feeling that something massive was coming. The creatures weren't just terrorizing the city, they were gathering, waiting for something. As they rounded another corner, they saw it. A dark portal, a swirling vortex of shadow and light, stood in the middle of an abandoned plaza. From within it, twisted forms began to emerge, more lurkers. But these weren't like the one Deku had fought earlier. These were larger, more menacing, with sharper teeth and jagged limbs, their bodies covered in thick, black ichor. They moved with unnatural speed, their eyes glowing like hollow pits. They're opening a rift, All Might shouted. We have to close it, or the city will be overrun. Deku's heart raced as he prepared for the fight of his life. What can we do? We need to stop them from coming through. All Might looked at him with a serious expression. You're going to have to use your full power, Midoriya. I'll help you, but you need to act fast. The first lurker lunged at them, its claws extended. Deku immediately jumped into action, using One for All at 30% to dodge its attack and land a powerful kick to its side. The creature screeched and staggered back, but more were coming through the rift. I'm not letting this city fall, Deku muttered to himself, focusing his energy. Detroit Smash. He charged forward, unleashing the full force of his punch, sending another lurker flying back into the rift. But for every one he took down, two more took its place. The creatures were relentless, and with every strike, they seemed to grow in number. All Might joined the fray, using his sheer strength to pummel the lurkers that came too close. His powerful punches and kicks tore through the air, sending creatures crashing to the ground, but the portal was still open. More and more of them poured out, each one more terrifying than the last. "We need to close that rift," Deku shouted, as he dodged another slash from a lurker's claw. All Might nodded grimly. "The rift's energy is tied to their fear. If you can stop the creatures from feeding off it, we might be able to close it." Deku's mind raced. "I have to stop their fear from spreading, but how?" His eyes landed on the citizens around him. Some were frozen in fear, others running in terror. The lurkers fed on this panic. He couldn't just fight them off with force. He had to calm the city, stop the fear from spreading. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on his breathing. "I have to believe in myself. I can't let fear take over." He remembered what All Might had always told him: true heroes don't just fight with power, they fight with hope. Deku stood tall and raised his voice, shouting over the chaos. "Everyone, listen to me." His voice cut through the fear like a beacon. Slowly, the people in the plaza began to stop, turning toward him. "You don't have to be afraid. We'll protect you. Stand together, don't let fear control you." His words seemed to reach them, and the panic began to subside. The lurkers, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, screeched in frustration. Their power was waning. "It's working," Deku thought, a sense of determination rising within him. "I have to finish this." With a powerful cry, Deku charged forward again, using 100% of One for All. His body surged with power, and his fist glowed with a bright, green aura as he aimed for the rift. United Detroit Smash. The punch landed with a tremendous shockwave, and the rift shattered. A brilliant burst of light filled the plaza, and the lurkers screeched in agony as they were sucked back into the vortex, which closed with a deafening snap. As the rift vanished, the plaza fell silent. The people, still shaken, looked around in awe, slowly starting to breathe again. Deku stood in the middle of the battlefield, panting from exhaustion, his body trembling from the immense effort. All Might clapped him on the back. "You did it, Midoriya. You stopped them." Deku smiled weakly, still feeling the weight of the battle. "We did it together, All Might. But this is just the beginning, isn't it?" All Might's expression turned serious again. "Yes, it is. These creatures are only the first wave. There's something bigger happening behind the scenes, and we have to be ready. But with you leading the charge, I know we can face whatever comes next." Deku nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. "I'll be ready." The night after the battle felt eerily quiet. The streets of Musutafu, which had once been filled with the chaos of the lurker invasion, were now calm again. The citizens had slowly returned to their homes, shaken but relieved. Deku stood in the plaza, watching the now peaceful scene, his mind still buzzing with questions. What was that all about? What's causing these rifts? Deku wondered aloud, his gaze fixed on the empty air where the portal had been moments ago. All Might had already left, taking the time to inform the authorities and help clear the area. He had asked Deku to rest, but the young hero couldn't shake the feeling that something even worse was lurking just beyond the horizon. The creatures they'd fought tonight were just the beginning, and the mysterious rift that had appeared, it was connected to something deeper. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Midoriya." Deku turned around to see Momo Yaoyorozu walking briskly toward him, her expression serious. "Momo, what's going on?" Deku asked, his voice still a little hoarse from the battle earlier. Momo's eyes darted around, making sure no one was listening, before speaking in a low tone. "I just got off the phone with Aizawa-sensei. There's something strange going on. The Hero Commission has reported a sudden increase in quirk-related anomalies across the country. And, they think it's connected to what happened with those lurkers. Deku's heart skipped a beat. Anomalies. What kind of anomalies? Momo's brow furrowed. Reports of people experiencing hallucinations, sudden bursts of intense fear, and, in some cases, new quirks appearing out of nowhere. But the strangest thing is that they've all been occurring around areas where rifts like the one we saw tonight have opened. Wait, are you saying the rifts are causing these anomalies? Deku asked, trying to process the information. Momo nodded. That's the theory. The rifts might be affecting the flow of quirks themselves, warping the very fabric of reality. It's like something is trying to alter the natural balance between this world and whatever's on the other side of those portals. Deku's mind raced. If the rifts are affecting people's quirks, that means more dangerous quirks could be appearing. And if the lurkers are involved, they could be the cause of it all. Momo looked deeply concerned. That's what Aizawa-sensei fears. But there's something else. The rifts, they're getting stronger. And the lurkers aren't the only creatures coming through. Before Deku could ask what she meant, a chilling noise echoed in the distance. It was faint at first, but the growl that followed made his blood run cold. He and Momo turned to face the sound. From the alley ahead, a dark figure emerged. It was another lurker. But this one was different. It was much larger than the one Deku had fought earlier. Its eyes glowed with a fiery red hue, and its body was covered in thick, pulsating veins. A series of jagged spines protruded from its back, each one crackling with dark energy. It was no longer just a mindless beast. It radiated power, the kind of unnatural strength that only a being from beyond the rift could possess. Not again, Deku muttered, his body instinctively shifting into a combat stance. The creature snarled, its black eyes locking onto them with an eerie, predatory gaze. It let out a deafening roar that shook the air. Another one. Momo gasped. Stay behind me. Deku shouted, but he knew it wasn't going to be that simple. The creature lunged forward, faster than the last, its claws scraping the ground like blades. With a burst of speed, Deku jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's attack. It's too fast. The creature spun around, its spines glowing with a menacing light. The air seemed to distort around it, and suddenly, dozens of smaller tendrils shot out from its back. They whizzed through the air like arrows, aiming straight for Deku and Momo. Watch out! Deku shouted, tackling Momo to the ground just as one of the tendrils passed overhead. His arm absorbed most of the impact as he shielded her from the attack. Deku, we need to think. We can't just keep dodging. Momo said, her voice strained as she quickly assessed the situation. Deku nodded, his mind working quickly. I need to take it down fast. He focused, drawing on one for all at 50%. With a burst of speed, he closed the distance between him and the creature, landing a powerful kick to its side. The impact sent the creature staggering back, but it didn't fall. Instead, it roared in rage, its eyes flashing as the tendrils shot toward him again. Deku gritted his teeth. I can't keep dodging like this. Suddenly, Momo's voice cut through the chaos. Deku, I have an idea. Give me a second. Deku didn't hesitate. He jumped back, creating some distance between them as the creature advanced. Momo's eyes were focused, her hands moving quickly as she started to create something. What are you planning? Deku asked, but he already knew she was working on something smart. Momo was always thinking ahead. Just hold it off for a moment. Momo replied, quickly forming a large, reflective surface from one of her gadgets. The surface shimmered, giving off a slight hum as it floated in the air between them and the creature. Deku's eyes widened. Are you going to blind it? Momo grinned. Exactly. With a sudden flick of her wrist, she launched the reflective surface toward the lurker. The surface tilted, catching the moonlight and reflecting it back directly into the creature's eyes. The lurker screeched in pain, stumbling back, blinded by the intense light. Now! Deku shouted. With one for all at 80%, he surged forward, his fists crackling with energy. Smash! His punch hit the lurker square in the chest, sending it flying backward, crashing into a nearby building. The creature let out one last, haunting screech before it collapsed, its body dissolving into black smoke. The plaza fell silent once again. Deku panted, his heart still racing. He turned to Momo, who was now standing beside him, wiping sweat from her brow. Nice work, Deku said, his voice full of gratitude. Momo gave him a tired smile. It was a team effort. But, we're not done yet. Deku looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Momo's expression darkened. The rift's still open. And I think we're dealing with something far worse than just these monsters. Something, or someone, is orchestrating all of this. Deku's eyes widened. Someone? You mean there's someone behind the rifts? Momo nodded grimly. I think it's time we find out who. The streets of Musudafu were quieter now, but the tension in the air had only grown. The battle with the lurker had left the city on edge, and Deku could sense that something far worse was on the horizon. The rift had closed, but the eerie feeling that something was lurking beneath the surface remained. Deku and Momo stood in front of a small, inconspicuous warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a place Momo had traced back to the source of strange disturbances, thanks to some research from the Hero Commission. They had learned that a series of quirk-related anomalies had been popping up near this location, anomalies that seemed to align with the appearance of the rifts. This is it, Momo said, looking at the weathered building in front of them. Everything points to this place. If we're going to find answers, it's here. Deku nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle on him. But what are we even looking for? Is someone controlling the rifts? Who could have that kind of power? Momo bit her lip, her brow furrowed in thought. I'm not sure yet, but I think the rifts aren't just random. Someone must be opening them intentionally, using some kind of device, or even a quirk. They both turned to face the large metal doors of the warehouse. It looked abandoned, the windows dark and grimy. A few scattered pieces of machinery were visible through the cracks, but otherwise, there was no sign of life. Let's go in, Deku said, his voice steady, though a nervous edge lingered in his words. He was no stranger to danger, but the unsettling events surrounding the rifts were unlike anything he had faced before. With a quick nod, Momo created a pair of lockpicks from the material around her, easily bypassing the warehouse's rusty lock. The door creaked open, and they slipped inside, their footsteps muffled on the concrete floor. The warehouse was vast, filled with shelves of old crates and discarded equipment. The air was thick with dust, but there was something else, something off. The deeper they went, the more the temperature seemed to drop, and the shadows between the shelves seemed to stretch longer than they should. This place feels wrong, Deku muttered, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing up again. Momo nodded in agreement. I feel it too. There's something here. Suddenly, a flickering light at the far end of the warehouse caught their attention. It was dim but steady, as if someone, or something, was working in the shadows. Stay alert, Deku whispered, his muscles tensing as he reached for the support of One for All at 20%. I think we're not alone. As they moved closer to the light, the source came into view, a small room at the back of the warehouse. It was filled with complex machinery, some kind of large console that was hooked up to a glowing, pulsating object at the center of the room. The object was spherical, a mass of shifting black and purple energy swirling inside it, almost as if it was alive. The machinery surrounding it looked high-tech, and the display screens were filled with strange symbols and data that neither Deku nor Momo recognized. But they weren't alone. At the center of the room, standing in front of the console, was a figure. He was tall and cloaked in a long, dark robe, his face hidden beneath a hood. The only thing visible were his glowing red eyes, which stared directly at them with an intensity that sent chills down their spines. Who are you? Momo demanded, stepping forward. What is this place? The figure's lips curled into a faint smile. You're asking the right questions, young heroes. But I'm afraid you're a little too late to stop what's already in motion. Deku's heart raced. You're the one behind the rifts, aren't you? The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, he raised his hand, and the pulsating sphere in the center of the room flickered. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening as the energy from the sphere intensified. Yes, I opened the rifts. And yes, I'm the one who has been calling the creatures from beyond. But there's more at play here than you realize, the figure said, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic. I am a servant of something far greater. Something that even you, with all your strength and resolve, cannot comprehend. Deku clenched his fists, his body coiling with tension. What are you talking about? Who are you working for? The figure chuckled softly. Ah, young Midoriya. I see you're eager to understand, but not yet ready to see the truth. Very well, I'll indulge you. My name is Kageyami, and I serve the Null King, the being who rules over the shadowy realms beyond your own. The rifts are merely the beginning of his return. Deku's mind was reeling. Null King, you're saying that thing, that monster from the other world, is not a thing, Kageyami interrupted, his voice sharp. It is the herald of the Null King's arrival. The lurkers were his scouts, sent to prepare this world for his reign. The creatures you've fought are just the tip of the iceberg. Soon, the veil between worlds will collapse entirely, and my master will come to claim this world as his own. Momo's eyes widened in horror. You're trying to open a portal, a permanent one, so that your Null King can invade. Kageyami nodded slowly, his smile widening beneath the hood. Exactly. The rifts are just the first step. The more fear and chaos I create, the stronger the connection between our worlds becomes. Soon, my master will have the power to cross through. And when that happens, there will be nothing anyone can do to stop him. Deku's mind was racing. He couldn't let this happen, not after everything they had been through. But how could he possibly fight against something this powerful? The Null King sounded like a being from beyond the limits of reality itself. I won't let you. Deku shouted, his voice filled with determination. I'll stop you. I'll stop the rifts. No matter what it takes. Kageyami tilted his head, as if amused by Deku's defiance. You still don't understand, do you? You can't stop what has already begun. The rifts are open. The Null King's return is inevitable. Before Deku could respond, the room suddenly darkened. The shadows stretched out from the walls like living tendrils, moving toward them with unnatural speed. You may have strength, Midoriya, Kageyami said, raising his hand and summoning more dark energy. But the Null King's influence will swallow you whole. The shadows surged toward them. Momo quickly created a barrier in front of them, but the dark energy hit it with a terrifying force, causing the shield to crack. Momo, get ready. Deku shouted. We need to stop this now. Just as the shadows lunged, Deku's body surged with power. He channeled One for All at 100%, unleashing a devastating United Detroit smash. The shockwave tore through the room, shattering Kageyami's dark energy and sending him flying backward. But even as Kageyami stumbled, he laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You may have won this battle, but you can't win the war. The Null King is already on his way. It's only a matter of time before the darkness consumes this world. Deku's heart pounded. He didn't know if he could stop this, but he would try. For his friends. For the people he swore to protect. We won't let it happen. Deku shouted, his voice resolute. Kageyami's figure flickered, and with a final cryptic smile, he vanished into the shadows, leaving the warehouse in silence.